sure they put carrots out there. I knew he wasn't going to starve.
So
And he could run fast enough.
Yeah. When did you go to Germany?
Well, then as soon as you got up to West Point, Pop came home, and I rented the house to this man by the name of Flood, and turned the keys over to him. And then Pop flew back, and I had to get on a transport in New York with all these other wives that were going over to meet their husbands. And I went over with them.
By ship?
By ship. And I got to Bremerhaven, and your husbands were not allowed to go up and meet the ship. You had to meet your husband at the place that he was stationed. So I had to go all the way from Bremerhaven down to Frankfurt, stopping with this trainload of women, stopping at every stop to let the wives off, and their husbands were there to meet them, and they'd have a band out.
Oh, so exciting.
Happy. It was something. It was something. These women hadn't seen their husbands for so long. And we'd had a sort of a rough trip over on this transport. I was better off because I didn't have children to take care of. And so Frankfurt was next to they had to go down to Bavaria, the last stop, but Frankfurt was pretty well, it was at night, around 9 o'clock at night when I got to Frankfurt. And the band was there, and I got off that train, and happy. I walked 2 feet off the ground. I didn't even know I was walking. I had the funniest feeling that I was up in the air. I was carried along. I never had experienced that feeling in my life. There was your father. And I walked out with him, and I was not on the ground. Isn't that the funniest thing? I literally don't remember touching the ground. That was wonderful. So it was just great to be over there with him. And I had lots of interesting experiences in Frankfurt. I had 2 German girls, one cook and one housemaid, assigned to the house. Frankfurt was behind high barbed wire fences, so that nobody could go in or out without passes. And your maids and girls couldn't take anything out from your house unless you had a slip showing them that they were allowed to take this out. And I saved all of my drippings, bacon fat, they saved everything, and then I would allow them to take the bacon fat because they had no fats at all. They were growing vegetables in their attics and things like that. Salad things. They were on their own. Literally, we were not allowed to feed them. They had their own economy. And anything that I could save, I could write a note and let them take it out, but it had to be with my signature. And it was the time that they had the barter marts, and if you got, you could take down anything that you got from the States that wasn't sold at the commissary of the PX. If my mother could send me a can of coffee from California, I could take that coffee down to the barter mart and get stamps for it. And the German people could come in and take their possessions and put them on for sale on another part of the building in exchange for any stamps that I got. And that was Lucius Clay set up that thing to try to wipe out the black market. It was a terrible time when a carton of cigarettes could buy you anything. You tipped with 2 cigarettes. When you had a meal, you after a meal, instead of putting a tip on it, you put 2 cigarettes down. Cigarettes were used as currency. And so my mother would send me dried milk and coffee and things that she got in her market, and she had to pay the freight to me. And you could see by the labels that it did not come from the commissary. I could take that down and I could pay for anything I wanted with these things. I had a beautiful suit and an exquisite coat made by a tailor, just giving him cigarettes that my mother had sent me and coffee and dried milk. And she sent me the materials, but he did all the labor. And there were lots of people that were still dealing in the black market. Louis, the general, I'm not even going to tell you his name, his wife was going down and really getting all kinds of things through the black market. Silver and porcelains and things like that. Well, I was scared to death. I wouldn't do it, but my mother was sending me these things, and so that's how I got the few little figurines that I do have through the barter mart. And the one little figurine that I have up there of the woman and the man in colonial dress, I got that up in Berlin with some of my things, and I also got a tablecloth up there, linen tablecloth. And incidentally, the little rocking horse with the children is Catherine's.
Yeah, I know that.
You know. But the others, you and she can divide up the way you feel like it. And so I lived in an awfully nice house with a beautiful garden, and we were right next to the house that housed the Russian, what would you call his?
Liaison mission.
Huh?
Probably.
Liaison. Because they had nothing but Russian people next door. And I can remember watching them from my bedroom window. They had the funniest game. They had huge logs that I couldn't possibly lift up myself. But they would have a circle, and they would take these big logs and they would throw them into the circle. It was something like a game of marbles. They had to knock something out. And then they would roar with laughter, and you'd hear these crashing of logs in there. And I can't imagine what in the world the game was all about, but it was simply absurd to see these men surrounding this big circle and throwing these logs in. I think it was like a game of marbles where you had to knock a marble out of the ring. Only they were knocking these logs out. Wasn't that funny? Well, anyway, the house right next, on my same street next to me, had been hit by a bomb, and the side had been sheared right off. And there was nothing but rubble at the bottom. And then my garden, and then my house. And on the second floor had been the bathroom. And that was the first thing I saw after I had arrived in Frankfurt the next morning after it was light. And I looked out and I saw the side of this mansion with the toilet hanging down the side of the house by its tubes, and the the bathtub hanging down by its tubes, and the lavatory hanging down on another place by its tubes. All this plumbing was holding it there. And that's what I looked at every morning. But I got to the point where I never even saw it. I never even knew it was up there. But my first impression was how perfectly terrible, all these entrails hanging down. It was just like something dead. A body dead.
Yeah.
So,
Well, where'd you travel to?
what?
Where did you and Pop travel to?
Well, he took me everywhere he could. He could get me a pass. And he had a private car. And we went through France. We went through Luxembourg. He took me up to Belgium. And on his leave, we went down to Switzerland just at Easter time. And before I left, well, I have to take you back just a little bit further to show you how we were living. The commissary had just canned goods and all, and one time when I was going to the commissary, I met a friend coming back, and she said, "Helen, hurry, hurry, they've got fresh cabbages in the commissary." And I started to run, and I ran up there, and I was one of the women that got a head of cabbage. And I can't tell you what a prize that was, because we had coleslaw. We had something that was fresh. And once in a while, the girls would, I don't know how I got it, but they would bring me little leaf lettuce about as big as this that they were growing in their attics, in flats. And when I had a 25th wedding anniversary on the 28th of December, that morning they brought me in an armful of white lilac that had been forced in an attic somewhere. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. In December, white lilac. Well, so when I had a chance to go to, Pop was going to take me on his leave to Switzerland, a neighbor that had a baby was going on leave with her husband, and she came, oh no, it wasn't that, it was before I went on there. This neighbor was going on leave with her husband, she had a baby, and she had a doctor's certificate to allow her to buy a quart of milk a day. Fresh milk. We had nothing but dried powdered milk, and it wasn't good tasting. She came over to me and she said that they were going to be gone for 2 weeks, and would I like to have her doctor's certificate for fresh milk. I don't know whether it was legal for them to do that, but I said I sure would love it. So for 2 weeks I had fresh milk, and I can't tell you what a luxury it was. So then it came Pop's time to go to Switzerland. And we would go to these, we stayed in right on Lake Lucerne in a beautiful hotel there. And in the morning, they'd bring me a soft-boiled egg in a tiny little egg cup sitting right there. And they showed us, I didn't know how to eat an egg in an egg cup because there was no way to dump it. You had to eat it right out of its little cup. So that you had to just, that's where Pop said, you have to hit it right
behind the ears.
Right behind the ears. And he would get his knife swinging, and he would go like that and get it right behind the ears. And you lifted off your little top, and there was a little demitasse spoon, and you ate your fresh egg right out of the shell. And when I left the hotel, and we wanted to thank the waiters and all, I said, I can't tell you how I love that fresh, how I loved your boiled eggs. And here was this French chef who had been cooking all this French, wonderful food, Swiss French, and all I could say was the wonderful boiled egg in the morning, because to me it was the most wonderful thing I could have had. And so we would go down in the afternoon to get a cup of tea in a little tea house. They had tea houses everywhere. And the place would be filled with English families. Their wives had joined their husbands, and they were over there too on a leave. But they were getting ice cream sodas. We were having tea. But the shops were the most beautiful shops I had ever seen in my life as far as candy was concerned. I have never seen such chocolate in my life. Gorgeous chocolate, Easter eggs and satin ribbon bows, and happy, it was so beautiful. The place was swimming in chocolates up there. And we who hadn't seen anything like that for so long, we really drooled. So, I think I better quit now. It's 11 o'clock.
That sounds fine.
And we'll have to continue this another time.
Yeah, we just...
But when I came back with Pop on this hospital ship, they were bringing back all of the war brides that the men had married over there, and they were most of them pregnant, or they had babies. And we hit the most terrible weather, and they were sitting in the corridors, sick, sitting on the floor, sick, just so sick. And we went out on the deck, and we were just going up and down. We weren't we were going backward. We were not going forward. And there was a colored woman out there. She was a bride, and she was by the railing. And your father said, "Look at all of that ocean. Look at all that water." And she said, "And just remember, you're only looking at the top." Louis never forgot that. Well, we had a stateroom together. We were awful lucky. But really, we were going up and we were going down. And the ship would go up and you'd hear the rudder going in the air, flying, and then it would come down. Bang! I've never been in such a storm in my life. You'd have to hang on to the bed. Well, I wasn't sick, but your father got sick. I don't know whether he got sick or not. I think he was all right. He got sick going out the Farallones. I have to tell you about that sometime when we were stationed at Fort Scott, and how he went fishing at midnight, and we took Suzanne and me, and all the officers went out on this tugboat. What was it? It was a mine setter, minesweeper, or mines. I think he set mines.
Yeah.
It was a mine setter. And you had to travel out to the Farallones and anchor to fish before the sun came up. So we were traveling at night. And Suzanne and I, we had gone to bed to have a little rest before we started out at midnight. We went down to the dock and we met everybody, and we got on this thing and began going out for the Farallones. And your father, you see, that was the channel where the tide was coming in and the tide was going out, and the wind was blowing this way and the wind was blowing that way, and so you were doing sort of the double hitch.
Right.
And he sat out on the deck with an army blanket around him, with his back up against the cabin, and he was green. And everybody else was inside playing poker. They went out there not to fish, but to play poker. He got out there and anchored, and he'd get in. The boat was in a trough, and just did this way all day long. And Suzanne and I fished, and we caught all kinds of tremendous fish. There was an eel on the deck that was as long as this room. And your father sitting out on the deck going this way, he wanted to die. He was so sick. I wasn't sick, Suzanne wasn't sick, but your father was sick. He was the only one on the boat sick. So they put all the fish that everybody had caught, they divided it up, and the one that had caught the most was going to get the pot. We went home with this big sack. He hadn't caught anything, but they gave it to Pop. He didn't win the prize, but we got a burlap bag full of eel and everything else. You know that the minute we docked, he was all right. He walked right off. He was perfectly all right. Down in Panama, he went out with the fleet. And he was so sick, he sat on the top deck under one of those turrets, gun turret, and the physician or the doctor on the ship came up to see him. And he said, you know, I only know one cure for what you've got, and that's to sit under an apple tree in an orchard. But they were in maneuvers happy, and they were, all these ships were going this way and going this way and going this way, and he was, and it was, they would get the swell from the back, and he just wanted to die. You better turn that off, because I'm going to have my lunch now. I'm being recorded.
Oh, nice.
And you don't want anything?
No,
You want some soup?
No, I'm gonna have.
Listen, have one of the...
I don't want any. I'm
All
gonna have
right.
lunch. I'm having lunch with somebody.
All right, well, you better pack up and
I'm
go.
gonna take a picture of your lunch.
Oh,
How does that look?
isn't that fun? Woo!
There you go. That looks pretty good.
It's carrot and celery and skim milk, all whipped up like whipped cream.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, that looks good.
I wish you'd taste it, will you?
No, that's fine.
Will you just taste it to see how Alberta makes it?
I'm just fine.
And I've got a tuna fish sandwich.
Look how big I'm
Oh,
getting.
I don't want to look like that. You can even see the scar on my face, on my nose, where I don't want you to zoom in on me.
Okay. Okay, we're going to continue this the next time I come.
All right.